Welcome, friend. Welcome to this quiet place where the pace of the world slows and time itself seems to soften at its edges. Tonight we journey back, far back, to a world before borders were drawn, before the word America echoed across these lands. We drift into the lives of people who knew the forest as their ceiling, the earth as their mattress, the stars as their only lamp. Imagine yourself there, in that slower, deeper time. The rhythm of days measured not by clocks but by sun and shadow. The sound of sleep not muffled by walls but woven into the chorus of crickets, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl. This is a story of rest, of how people slept, dreamed, and woke in a world shaped entirely by nature and culture intertwined. It is a story of discomfort and beauty, of fragility and resilience, of nights both harsh and sacred. But before we step into this quiet journey together, I have a small favor to ask. If your heart is ready to wander back through time with me tonight, would you gently tap that like button? It's a small gesture, but it helps this story find its way to other wandering souls. Be sure to subscribe so you'll always find your way back to these late-night passages into history's quieter corners. And leave a comment. Tell me where you are right now. What time is it where you're listening? Are you tucked into bed in the stillness of midnight? Or perhaps sipping morning tea as dawn breaks? Wherever you are, you're part of this circle now. Now then, dim the lights if you can. Maybe turn on a gentle fan for that soft, continuous hum that soothes the mind. Settle in. Let your breathing slow. You are young, your body is strong, but your bones remember every day's work. You live somewhere in what will one day be called the Eastern Woodlands, rolling hills thick with oak, maple, birch, and pine. The land is generous, but it demands payment in labor, in vigilance, in endurance. It is late spring, sliding into summer. The days stretch longer now, and twilight lingers, soft and golden, before dissolving into the cool blue of night. But those beautiful hours mean little when your body aches. Your home is a wigwam, a dome of bent saplings lashed together, covered with sheets of bark, woven mats, sometimes hides, if your family has been fortunate in the hunt. It is small, it is shared, and tonight, like every night, it will become the place where you try to rest. Dawn does not wait for permission. It seeps through the cracks in the bark walls, pale and insistent, pulling you from whatever thin sleep you manage to grasp. The air inside is cold and damp. Dew has collected on the inner surface of the roof during the night, and now it drips, slow, irregular, onto the edge of your sleeping mat. Your back aches. It always aches. You slept on a woven reed mat layered over the packed earth floor, with perhaps a deerskin beneath you if your father's last hunt went well. But the ground is unforgiving. There are stones you cannot remove, roots that press upward, the hard packed clay that molds itself to your hip, your shoulder, your spine. You stretch, slowly, hearing your joints complain. Your neck is stiff. You must have twisted it in the night, trying to avoid the cold draft that leaks in where the bark sheets don't quite meet. The fire in the center of the wigwam has burned down to embers. It is your task this morning to coax it back to life. You kneel beside it, blowing gently, feeding it dried grasses, then small twigs, watching the smoke curl upward toward the hole in the roof. Some of it escapes, much of it does not. Your eyes sting. You blink away tears. This is how every day begins. Once the fire is alive again, you must fetch water. The stream is not far, perhaps 200 paces through the trees, but the path is uneven, slick with morning moisture, roots waiting to catch your foot. You carry a clay pot, heavy even when empty, cradled against your chest. The stream is cold. It always is, even in summer. You kneel on the smooth stones at its edge, dipping the pot carefully, feeling the weight increase, the water shockingly cold against your wrists. You lift it, adjust your grip, and begin the walk back. Your arms tremble by the time you reach the wigwam. You set the pot down near the fire, rolling your shoulders, trying to release the knot of tension that has already formed between your shoulder blades. And the day has barely begun. By mid-morning, the sun is climbing, and with it comes heat. You are out in it now, gathering, always gathering. Today it is roots. You dig with a sharpened stick, prying them from the earth, your fingers caked with dirt, your knees pressed into the ground. Sweat rolls down your temples, stings your eyes, drips from your chin. Flies buzz around you. They land on your arms, your neck. You swat them away, but they return, persistent, maddening. Your stomach growls. Breakfast was thin, a handful of parched corn, some dried berries left from last autumn. There will be more food tonight, if the day's work goes well. If. By midday, the heat is oppressive. You return to the wigwam to help prepare food, grinding corn with a stone pestle, a repetitive motion that makes your wrists ache, your forearms burn. The sound of stone on stone fills the small space, rhythmic, hypnotic, numbing. Your mother tends a cooking fire outside where fish from this morning's catch are being smoked. The smell is rich, but it mingles with the ever-present scent of sweat, of earth, of the hides drying nearby. You help your younger siblings, wiping a face, settling an argument, keeping them away from the fire. They are loud, endlessly energetic, and you love them fiercely, but today you are tired. You are always tired. The afternoon blurs. There is always something, repairing a tear in the wigwam's bark covering, gathering more firewood, checking the small garden plot where squash and beans grow in the sunlight. Your hands are never still. Your body is never at rest. And then finally the sun begins its slow descent. As the light softens and the air cools, you feel a subtle shift. The day's labor is ending. Soon you will eat. Soon you will rest. But the transition from day to night is not simple. There are tasks still, preparing the evening meal, banking the fire so it will last through the night, making sure the younger children are settled, checking that the wigwam is secure against wind or rain. You eat together, sitting in a circle. Tonight there is fish, corn mush, some greens gathered from the forest edge. It is warm, filling, a small comfort. You chew slowly, savoring it, knowing tomorrow you will be hungry again. Stories are told. Your grandmother speaks of the ancestors, of how the world was made, of spirits that walk in the forest. Her voice is low, rhythmic, soothing. The children listen, their eyes wide in the firelight. And then it is time. You prepare your sleeping place. You unroll your mat, woven reeds, fraying at the edges, worn thin in places. Beneath it, you spread a layer of dried grasses, hoping for a little extra softness, a little extra insulation from the cold ground. If you are fortunate, there is a deer skin to pull over yourself. If not, you make do with what you have, perhaps a woven blanket, perhaps just your clothes and the warmth of those sleeping beside you. The wigwam is crowded. Your parents sleep on one side, your grandmother near the fire, your siblings clustered together for warmth. There is no privacy, no separation. You hear every breath, every shift, every cough. You lie down and immediately your body begins its catalogue of complaints. The mat is too thin. There is a stone pressing into your left hip. Your right shoulder finds a slight depression in the ground, but it is not quite the right shape, and soon it aches. You shift, you adjust, you pull the skin higher over your shoulders. The fire crackles softly, casting shifting shadows on the curved walls. Smoke drifts lazily upward, some of it escaping through the smoke hole, some of it lingering, making the air hazy. And now the cold arrives. Even in late spring, the nights are cool. The temperature drops, and the thin walls of the wigwam offer little protection. You feel the cold seeping up from the ground, stealing the warmth from your body. You curl tighter, pulling your knees toward your chest. You tuck your hands under your arms. You press closer to your sister, who sleeps beside you, her small body radiating a precious warmth. But it is not enough. The wind picks up, and you hear it moving through the trees outside, a low, restless sound. It finds the gaps in the bark walls, the places where the lashing has loosened, and it pushes through, cold fingers probing, insistent. You pull the deerskin over your head, but now you cannot breathe as easily. You push it back down, endure the cold. Sleep does not come easily. Your mind is still half aware, listening. You hear the crackle of the fire, the soft breathing of your family, your father's occasional snore, your youngest brother's restless shifting. Outside, the night is alive. Crickets sing their endless pulsing song. Frogs call from the direction of the stream. An owl hoots, low and mournful, somewhere in the darkness. And then a sound that makes you tense. A branch cracking. Something moving through the underbrush. You lie still, listening. Is it a deer, a raccoon, or something larger, more dangerous? The sound fades. You exhale slowly, willing your heart to slow, but you do not fully relax. You cannot. The night is not entirely safe. You have heard the stories of wolves, of bears, of strangers from other tribes passing through. You have learned to sleep lightly, to wake at the slightest unusual sound. This is not rest. This is vigilance, softened only slightly by exhaustion. An hour passes, perhaps two. You have drifted into a shallow sleep, but now you wake again. Your hip aches where it has been pressed against the ground. You shift to your other side, trying to find a more comfortable position. The mat has bunched beneath you. You reach down, trying to smooth it, but in the darkness you cannot see what you are doing. You give up, lie still, try again to sleep. Your nose is cold, your feet are cold. You flex your toes, trying to bring warmth back into them. You become aware of an itch on your calf. You scratch it. Then another on your shoulder. Insects, always insects. You scratch again, knowing it will only make it worse, unable to stop yourself. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, of unwashed bodies, of the hides and furs and mats that make up your small world. It is not unpleasant exactly, it is familiar, the smell of home, but tonight it seems stifling. You long for fresh air, but if you move the bark covering aside to let in the breeze, you also let in the cold. You lie still. You breathe. You wait for sleep to find you again. When sleep finally comes, it is thin, fragile, easily broken. You dream. In your dream, you are walking through the forest. The trees are taller than they should be, and the light is strange, neither day nor night, but something in between. You hear voices, but you cannot find the speakers. Your grandmother has told you that dreams are messages, that the spirits speak to us when we sleep, when our minds are open, unguarded. You try to remember the dream, to hold on to its details, knowing that in the morning you may be asked to share it, to interpret it. But the dream shifts, becomes confused. You are no longer in the forest, you are by the stream, but the water is flowing backward, uphill, and you do not understand why. You wake with a start. For a moment you do not know where you are. The darkness is complete. The fire has burned down to almost nothing. You hear your father moving. He adds a piece of wood to the embers, coaxing them back to life. A small flame flickers, then grows. The shadows retreat slightly. You close your eyes, you try to return to sleep. The night stretches on, you wake and sleep in cycles, never fully resting, never fully alert. Each time you wake, you are aware of some new discomfort, a cramp in your calf, a stiffness in your neck, the pressure of your bladder. You do not want to leave the wigwam. It is cold outside and dark, and you would have to step over sleeping bodies, disturb the fragile quiet. You hold on, you wait. Finally, you see the first pale hint of dawn through the gaps in the walls. The darkness softens to grey. The birds begin their morning chorus. You have survived another night. You sit up slowly, your body stiff and sore. You rub your eyes, your face. You prepare to begin the day again. This is what sleep was. This is what rest meant. It was not a luxury. It was not even truly comfortable. It was a fragile gift, stolen in moments between labor and vigilance, between cold and hunger, between the demands of survival and the weight of responsibility. You slept because your body demanded it, but you woke knowing that rest was never guaranteed, never complete, never entirely safe. And yet, in those brief moments when sleep did come, when the aches faded, when the cold receded, when the sounds of the night became a distant lullaby, there was something almost sacred, a small surrender, a quiet trust, a closing of the eyes beneath a sky that had watched over your people for generations beyond counting. Let us shift our attention now as twilight deepens into night. Let us move from the general to the particular, from the rhythm of days to the story of a single life. Her name was Otsitsa. In the language of her people, it meant something like star maker or she who gathers light. Though translations across time are always incomplete, always approximations of deeper meanings now half lost, she was Cherokee. She lived in the rolling, forested hills of what would one day be called the Appalachian region, a land of rivers that run cold and clear, of mountains that rise in layered blue ridges, of forests so thick that even at midday the light filters down in soft, broken columns. The time, late in the 15th century. A world still whole, still unbroken by the changes that would come. Otsitsa was young, perhaps 17, perhaps 18 summers, at the moment our story finds her. Old enough to carry responsibility, young enough to still dream of paths not yet taken. She was the eldest of 4 children. Her mother, Awenasa, was a gatherer of plants, a walker of the forest paths, someone who knew which roots would ease a fever, which leaves would stop bleeding, which bark could be peeled and chewed to calm a troubled stomach. Her father, whose name has been lost to us, was a hunter. He moved through the woods with a patience that seemed almost supernatural, returning with deer, turkey, rabbit, meat that sustained the family through the seasons. Her grandmother, her mother's mother, was the keeper of stories. She sat by the fire on long winter evenings and spoke of the ancestors, of how the world began, of the spirits that moved through all living things. Her voice was like the sound of water over stones, constant, soothing, old. Otsitsa had 2 younger brothers and a sister. The sister, Adsila, was 12, bright-eyed and quick-fingered, already skilled at weaving. The brothers were restless, always underfoot, full of questions and energy. The family lived in a dwelling built of wood and bark, situated in a small clearing near a stream. Around them were other families, a loose cluster of homes that together formed their community, perhaps 30 or 40 people in total, connected by blood, by marriage, by shared seasons and shared struggles. Otsitsa's days followed the ancient pattern. In spring and summer she worked in the gardens, small plots where corn, beans and squash grew together in the way her people had learned over countless generations. The corn provided tall stalks for the beans to climb, the beans fixed nutrients in the soil, the squash spread wide leaves that shaded the ground, keeping it moist, keeping weeds at bay. She also gathered wild foods, She knew where the best patches of ramps grew in early spring, their pungent smell filling the air when she pulled them from the earth. She knew which trees produced the sweetest nuts in autumn, which berry bushes were worth the scratches from thorns. In summer, the work was hot, endless. Her back ached from bending, from carrying heavy baskets. The sun burned the back of her neck. Mosquitoes found every exposed patch of skin. Sweat ran into her eyes, stinging, blurring her vision. But there was also beauty. The way the light fell through the leaves, the coolness of the stream when she knelt to drink, the satisfaction of a basket filled, a task completed. In winter, the rhythm changed. The world grew quiet, cold, inward. There was less to do outside, but the work moved indoors, repairing tools, weaving, preparing hides, telling stories. The nights stretched long, and the cold was relentless. Let us watch Otsitsa on a particular evening in late autumn. The harvest is in. The corn has been dried and stored. The air carries the first real bite of winter. She helps her mother prepare the evening meal. They work in companionable silence, a silence born of long familiarity. Tonight there is venison, her father was successful yesterday, and corn mush, and some of the last greens from the garden, slightly bitter but still welcome. The fire burns in the center of their home, the smoke rising toward the opening in the roof. Most of it escapes. Some of it lingers, making the air hazy, making Otsitsa's eyes water. The family eats together as darkness settles outside. Her younger brothers argue about something inconsequential. Otsitsa sits close to the fire, her fingers working at a piece of weaving even as she eats. Their grandmother tells a story about Rabbit, the trickster, and how he stole fire from the thunders. Otsitsa listens, but her mind wanders. She is thinking about sleep, about rest. She is tired, the kind of tired that goes beyond muscles and bones, that settles into the very center of her being. After the meal, she helps clean. She sweeps the floor with a bundle of twigs, pushing dirt and food scraps toward the entrance. She checks the bark walls, looking for gaps that might let in the cold wind. She finds one, stuffs it with dried grass. She gathers the sleeping materials, mats woven from reeds and cattails, deerskins from previous hunts, a few woven blankets. She spreads them out carefully, creating sleeping places for each member of the family. For herself, she chooses a spot near the wall, away from the fire but not too far. Close enough for warmth, far enough to avoid sparks. She lies down. The mat is familiar beneath her, worn soft in some places, lumpy in others. She pulls a deerskin over herself, tucking it around her shoulders. The fur is soft against her cheek. The fire crackles. Her family settles around her. Her father's breathing deepens quickly. He is exhausted from days of hunting. Her mother murmurs something to her grandmother, too soft for Otsitsa to hear. Otsitsa shifts restlessly beside her, then finally goes still. Otsitsa stares up at the roof. Through the smoke hole, she can see a patch of sky. A few stars are visible, cold and distant. She watches them, feeling her body begin to relax, the tension of the day slowly releasing. She thinks about her mother's work, the gathering of healing plants, the knowledge of which roots and leaves and barks could ease suffering. It is knowledge passed down from grandmother to mother to daughter, an unbroken line stretching back beyond memory. Otsitsa wants this knowledge. She wants to be a healer, to walk the forest paths with that same quiet confidence, to know the secrets that the plants hold. But the path is not easy. It requires years of learning, of observation, of making mistakes and remembering the lessons. It requires a certain temperament, patience, attention, a willingness to listen not just with ears but with something deeper. Does she have this? She hopes so. She believes so. But the doubt lingers, a small shadow at the edge of her thoughts. She closes her eyes. Sleep comes gradually, in soft waves. She feels herself drifting, the boundaries between waking and sleeping blurring. She dreams. In the dream, she is climbing a mountain. The path is steep, rocky, difficult. Her legs ache with the effort, but she keeps climbing, drawn by something she cannot name. At the summit, there is a spring, clear water bubbling up from the rocks. An old woman sits beside it. The woman's face is deeply lined, but her eyes are bright. Knowing, the old woman speaks. "You are thirsty," she says. Otsitsa nods. She kneels beside the spring, cups her hands, drinks. The water is cold, sweet, unlike any water she has tasted before. This water, the old woman says, carries memory. It remembers every root that has drunk from it, every leaf that has fallen into it, every creature that has paused here to drink. To be a healer, you must be like this water. You must remember, you must carry what you learn. Otsitsa wants to ask more, but the old woman is fading, dissolving into mist, and Otsitsa is falling, falling. She wakes with a gasp. Her heart is racing. The fire has burned low, just embers now, casting barely enough light to see. The air is cold. She pulls the deerskin higher, trying to calm herself. Was it just a dream? Or was it something more, a message, a vision, a teaching from the spirit world? Her grandmother has told her that dreams are doorways, that the ancestors speak to us when we sleep, when our minds are quiet and open, that we must pay attention, must remember, must try to understand what we are being shown. Otsitsa lies still, replaying the dream in her mind, trying to hold on to every detail. The mountain, the spring, the old woman's words, the taste of the water. She will tell her grandmother in the morning. Perhaps she will know what it means. Weeks pass, the seasons turn. Winter arrives in earnest, bringing snow that blankets the forest, ice that sheathes the streams, wind that howls through the trees. The nights are long now. The family spends more time indoors, huddled near the fire, conserving energy, conserving resources. Food must be rationed. Firewood must be used carefully. Every decision is measured against the question, will we have enough? And then disaster. Otsitsa's youngest brother, the boy is only 6, falls ill. It begins with a cough, dry and persistent. Then comes fever. His skin burns to the touch. His eyes are glassy, unfocused. Her mother tries everything she knows. Teas brewed from willow bark to lower the fever. Poultices of crushed herbs applied to his chest. Steam from heated water to ease his breathing. But the boy gets worse. The cough becomes deeper, wetter. He struggles for breath. He cannot keep food down. He grows thin, frighteningly thin, his ribs visible beneath his skin. Otsitsa takes on the task of watching him through the nights. Someone must keep the fire burning hot, must keep water warming, must be ready to help if he wakes choking, gasping. She does not sleep, or rather, she sleeps in fragments. 20 minutes here, half an hour there, always alert, always listening. The nights are endless. She sits beside her brother, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest. She wipes his forehead with a damp cloth. She holds his hand, feeling the fever burning through him. Outside, the wind screams. Snow piles against the walls. The cold presses in from all sides, and even with the fire burning, the air inside is frigid. Otsitsa's eyes burn with exhaustion. Her back aches from sitting. Her throat is tight with fear. She prays. She speaks to the spirits, asking for mercy, for healing, for guidance. She makes promises. She will be a better sister, a better daughter. She will dedicate herself to learning the healing arts. She will serve her people. If only he lives, if only. On the third night of the vigil, her grandmother comes to sit beside her. The old woman says nothing at first, just sits, her presence a comfort. Then quietly, "You remember your dream? The spring on the mountain?" Otsitsa nods. "The water remembers," her grandmother says. "And so must you. Remember this night. Remember what you feel, what you see, what you learn. It will make you stronger. It will make you wiser." "But what if he dies?" Otsitsa whispers. "What if I cannot help him?" Her grandmother is silent for a long moment. Then, "We do what we can. We offer our care, our prayers, our knowledge. But the spirits decide. We cannot control everything. We can only tend the fire. We can only offer water. We can only be present." It is not the answer Otsitsa wants, but it is, she realizes, the truth. On the fourth day, something changes. The fever breaks. The boy's skin is suddenly cool, damp with sweat. He sleeps more peacefully. When he wakes, his eyes are clearer. He is weak, terribly weak, but he is alive. Otsitsa weeps. She cannot help it. The relief is overwhelming, a wave that crashes over her, leaving her shaking, exhausted, grateful. Her mother holds her. "You did well," she says softly. "You kept watch. You kept him warm. You did not give up." That night, Otsitsa finally sleeps, a deep, dreamless sleep, her body finally surrendering to its exhaustion. She sleeps for hours, undisturbed, her breathing slow and even. When she wakes, it is afternoon. The light coming through the cracks in the walls is different, softer, warmer. She sits up slowly, disoriented. Her brother is awake, sipping broth. Otsitsa sits beside him, telling him a story. Everything has changed, and nothing has changed. Spring comes, as it always does. The snow melts. The streams swell with runoff. The first green shoots push up through the earth, and the forest begins to wake. Otsitsa walks with her mother now, learning the plants. Her mother shows her where to find the first medicines of spring. The tender leaves that can be eaten to cleanse the blood after a long winter. The roots that can be dug and dried for later use. "You have the gift," her mother says one day. "You have the patience, the attention, the willingness to sit with suffering and not turn away." Otsitsa thinks of those long nights, watching her brother fight for breath, the fear, the exhaustion, the helplessness. Yes, she did not turn away. "I want to learn," she says. Her mother nods. "Then we begin." As the seasons turn, Otsitsa comes to understand something about sleep, about rest, that she had not known before. Sleep is not just the absence of waking. It is not just the body shutting down to recover. Sleep is a kind of trust. It is a surrender to the world, to the night, to the spirits that move through darkness. It is a willingness to let go of control, to accept vulnerability. Every time she lies down, she is making a small act of faith. Faith that she will wake, faith that her family will be there, faith that the sun will rise again. And when sleep is interrupted by cold, by fear, by the needs of others, that trust becomes more precious, more fragile, more consciously chosen. She learns to rest in small moments, a pause in the afternoon sun, a brief closing of the eyes while sitting by the stream, the deep breath before beginning the next task. Rest is not a luxury, it is a necessity. But more than that, it is a practice, a skill, a way of being in the world. Let us watch Otsitsa one more time, years later. She is older now, perhaps 23, perhaps 24. She has become what she hoped to become, a healer, a gatherer of plants, a keeper of knowledge. Tonight, she has been called to another family's home. A woman is in labor, struggling. Otsitsa brings her knowledge, her calm presence, her hands that know how to help. The labor is long. It lasts through the night and into the dawn. Otsitsa does not sleep. She stays beside the woman, offering water, offering encouragement, offering the herbs that ease pain, that strengthen contractions. Finally, as the sun rises, the baby is born. A girl, small but healthy, her cry loud and indignant. The mother weeps with relief. The grandmother blesses the child. The family gathers around, welcoming this new life. Otsitsa walks home through the morning forest. She is exhausted, her feet ache, her eyes burn, but she is content. She reaches her family's home. Her mother is awake, tending the fire. She looks up, sees Otsitsa's face, understands. "Rest now," her mother says. Otsitsa lies down on her mat. She pulls the familiar deerskin over herself. She closes her eyes. And this time, sleep comes instantly, completely, mercifully. A sleep earned through service, through care, through the giving of herself to her community. She dreams of springs and mountains. She dreams of stars. She dreams of children not yet born, learning the names of plants, carrying forward the knowledge. She dreams of rest itself, that fragile, precious thing, woven through with labor and love and the endless turning of seasons. But let us be honest. Let us not romanticize. Even now, even as a healer, Otsitsa's sleep is often broken. She is called out in the night for emergencies. She lies awake worrying about patients, about whether she did enough, whether her knowledge is sufficient. The ground is still hard. The cold still seeps in. The smoke still stings her eyes. Her body aches from the day's work. Her mind races with all that needs to be done tomorrow. Sleep remains elusive, precious, always tinged with the awareness that it could be interrupted at any moment. But she has learned to accept this, to work within it, to find rest where she can, when she can, however she can. Through Otsitsa's eyes, we see what sleep meant in her world. Not a guaranteed 8 hours in a comfortable bed, not a time of complete separation from the community, from responsibility, from the needs of others. Sleep was woven into the fabric of life. It was interrupted by children, by illness, by cold, by the demands of survival. It was never entirely secure, never entirely comfortable, but it was also sacred. It was the time when dreams came, when the spirit spoke, when the boundaries between this world and the next grew thin. It was the time when the body, that weary, aching, hard-working body, could finally release its burdens, if only for a few hours. It was the time when vulnerability became a strength, when surrender became an act of courage. And in those moments of true rest, when sleep finally came and held, there was a peace that modern comfort can never quite replicate. A peace that came from knowing you were held by your community, by your land, by the ancient rhythms that had sustained your people since the beginning of time. A peace that came from accepting the fragility of life, the uncertainty of tomorrow, and choosing to close your eyes anyway, to trust, to rest, to dream. Let us drift now into deeper waters. Let us move from the particular life of Otsitsa into the realm of mystery, into what we know, what we can only guess, and what remains forever silent beneath the soil. This is a journey into fragments and whispers, into the careful work of piecing together a story that the earth holds close to its chest, reluctant to reveal. When archaeologists dig into ancient sites, into the remains of longhouses, wigwams, pueblos, earth lodges, they are searching for clues. They are trying to reconstruct how people lived, how they moved through their days, how they rested at night. They sift through soil with brushes and trowels. They examine every discoloration, every anomaly in the Earth's strata. They bring scientific instruments, chemical analyses, comparative databases. They approach the ground with questions, hoping it will offer answers. But sleep leaves few traces. A bed does not fossilize, a dream cannot be excavated. The soft things, the woven reeds, the piled furs, the grasses gathered and dried, these decay rapidly in most conditions, returning to the earth that provided them. And the intangible things, the feeling of exhaustion, the quality of darkness, the specific texture of rest in a particular season, these were never solid to begin with. They existed only in lived experience, and when those lives ended, the experiences went with them. What remains is fragmentary, suggestive, incomplete. And so we must piece together the story of sleep from what little the earth has preserved. We must become detectives of the intimate, scholars of the vanished, interpreters of silence. We must look at stains in the soil and imagine the hide that left them. We must examine pollen grains under microscopes and reconstruct the plants that once filled the air with scent. We must measure the dimensions of ancient rooms and imagine the bodies that once filled them with warmth and breath. In the Eastern Woodlands, archaeologists have found the remnants of woven mats, reeds, cattails, bark fibers, twisted and interlaced in patterns that show remarkable skill. These mats are fragile. They decay quickly in most conditions, succumbing to moisture, to bacteria, to the countless small organisms that break down organic matter. But in certain sites where the soil is very dry or very wet, where oxygen is limited and decomposition slows to a crawl, fragments survive. They are found in the corners of ancient dwellings pressed against walls where they were protected from the elements. They are discovered in storage pits, in refuse heaps, sometimes even in graves where they were placed as offerings or as comfort for the dead. The mats are thin, much thinner than a modern mattress, thinner even than a camping pad or sleeping bag, perhaps half an inch thick, perhaps a full inch if layered, though even this would have been a luxury, requiring double the labor and double the materials. The weave is tight in some places, looser in others, creating a surface that would have given slightly underweight, but not much. The tighter the weave, the more comfortable the mat, but also the more time-consuming to create. Hours upon hours of work went into each one, gathering the materials at the right time of year, drying them properly to prevent mold, sorting them by length and thickness, then the meditative, repetitive work of weaving itself. Fingers moving in ancient patterns, knowledge passed from grandmother to mother to daughter, from elder to apprentice. Beneath these mats, sometimes there is evidence of grasses. Pollen analysis reveals the presence of specific species, sweet grass perhaps, or dried sedges, plants that would have provided a small amount of cushioning, a small barrier between body and earth. The grass would have been gathered in late summer or early fall when it was dry and golden, bundled and stored until needed. It would have been spread in a layer perhaps 2 or 3 inches thick, loose and airy at first, then gradually compacting under the weight of bodies and the passage of time. Every few weeks, perhaps every month, it would need to be refreshed, the old grass swept away and new grass laid down. This was part of the rhythm of household maintenance, as routine as tending the fire or preparing food. And sometimes, very rarely, there are traces of animal hides, furs. The impression left in the soil where a deerskin once lay, long since rotted away, but the tannins from the leather staining the earth in a particular pattern. These stains are subtle, a slightly darker color, a different texture, a variation in chemical composition that specialized tests can detect. When archaeologists find them, they photograph them meticulously. They map their exact location and extent. They take samples for laboratory analysis. Because these stains are precious, they are among the few direct evidences we have of the softer, more comfortable layers of ancient bedding. The hides themselves would have been the product of enormous labor. A deer had to be hunted, killed, processed. The hide had to be removed carefully, stretched, scraped clean of fat and tissue, treated with brains or other tanning agents, worked and worked until it became supple. A single hide might require days of intensive labor, and even then it would eventually wear out, developing holes and stiff patches, until it could no longer serve as bedding and was repurposed for something else, or, finally, discarded. These are the beds. This is what people slept on. Not the yielding comfort of innerspring mattresses, not the conforming support of memory foam, not even the simple padding of a straw tick. Just thin mats, some grass, perhaps a hide, if you were fortunate, or skilled, or both. Imagine lying down on such a surface. Close your eyes and try to feel it. The reed mat, slightly rough against your skin, its texture distinct, almost scratchy if you run your hand against the grain. The faint rustling sound it makes when you shift your weight, a dry whisper that might wake a light sleeper nearby. The way it compresses under your hip, under your shoulder, until you feel the hard earth beneath, not immediately, but gradually, as the grass beneath compacts and the mat yields to your weight. After an hour or two, you would feel every stone, every slight irregularity in the ground beneath you. It is not comfortable. Not by modern standards. Most of us, accustomed to deep mattresses and climate-controlled rooms, would find such sleeping conditions nearly unbearable. We would wake stiff and aching, unable to find a position that didn't hurt after a while. We would complain about the hardness, the cold seeping up from below, the way every small movement transmitted through the thin layers to wake us fully. But it is not nothing either. It is the result of hours of labor, gathering, drying, weaving. It is the best that could be made with available materials and available time. It represents knowledge accumulated over generations, refinements of technique, adaptations to local conditions and local plants. Different regions develop different styles of mats, different weaving patterns, different materials. Some were more tightly woven, some more loosely. Some used cattails exclusively, others mixed various plants to achieve different properties. Some plants more water-resistant, others more insect-repellent. Still others chosen simply because they were abundant and easy to work. It is what rest looked like. This was the surface that held bodies in sleep, that absorbed dreams and nightmares, that witnessed births and deaths and the quiet breathing of children. This was the interface between human vulnerability and the earth itself, a thin barrier against the cold and damp, a small concession to comfort carved out of a world that offered none naturally. In the southwest, among the ancestral Puebloans, archaeologists have found something different. Small platforms built into the walls of rooms, stone shelves, really, perhaps 2 feet off the ground, perhaps 3. They are found in various Pueblo sites, sometimes 1 per room, sometimes 2 or 3, positioned along the walls at regular intervals. The stones are carefully fitted, mortared into place with clay or adobe, strong enough to bear the weight of an adult human body night after night for years. Were these sleeping platforms? The evidence suggests yes, though, as with so much in archaeology, absolute certainty remains elusive. The surfaces show signs of wear, of repeated contact. The stone has been smoothed by use, polished almost, in patterns consistent with the pressure and friction of human bodies. Sometimes there are remnants of woven mats on top of the stone, the same kind of mats found elsewhere, but here protected by the dry desert air and the shelter of the room. Sometimes there are small indentations, as if from the repeated placement of something, perhaps a rolled blanket, perhaps a bundle used as a pillow, placed in the same spot night after night, until it left its mark. Sleeping on stone seems impossible, unbearable. The word stone itself evokes coldness, hardness, discomfort. We think of stone as the opposite of restful, as something to avoid rather than seek out. But consider the context, consider the environment, consider the ingenuity of adaptation. Stone retains heat. This is basic physics, but its implications are profound. In the cold desert nights, when temperatures can plummet 40 or 50 degrees from daytime highs, if the stone had been warmed by the sun during the day or by a fire burning nearby throughout the evening, it would radiate that warmth for hours. Long after the sun had set, long after the fire had burned down to coals, the stone would still hold heat, releasing it slowly through the night. A person lying on such a platform would feel that warmth against their back, their side, whatever part of their body pressed against it. They would be warmed from below as well as from whatever blankets or hides covered them above, and being elevated even slightly provides protection from the cold air that sinks and pools at ground level. Cold air is heavier than warm air. It settles downward, forming a layer along the floor that can be noticeably colder than the air just a few feet up. By sleeping on raised platforms, people escaped this coldest zone. They inhabited a slightly warmer microclimate, a few precious degrees that could make the difference between shivering wakefulness and genuine rest. Elevation also provides separation from insects, from moisture, from the small creatures that move along the floor in darkness, mice and rats, beetles and spiders, all the small life that shares human dwellings. These mostly travel along the ground, along walls through the lowest spaces. A raised sleeping platform puts one above this zone of activity, reducing unwanted encounters. And moisture, whether from rain seeping through the roof, from condensation forming on cold walls, from water tracked in on feet and clothing, moisture accumulates at the lowest points. A raised platform stays drier, and dryness means warmth, means health, means less chance of the respiratory ailments that plagued pre-modern peoples. So perhaps these stone platforms were not as uncomfortable as they seem. Perhaps they were, in their context, a kind of luxury. Perhaps the people who slept on them felt fortunate, felt that they had achieved a degree of comfort that others lacked. Perhaps they took pride in the craftsmanship of their platforms, in the way the stones were fitted and mortared, in the smooth surface they had achieved through careful selection and placement of materials. In the Great Plains, the evidence is different again. Teepees left little permanent trace. They were designed to be portable after all, to be dismantled and moved as the seasons and the herds demanded. The entire structure could be taken down in less than an hour by experienced hands, folded, rolled, packed onto travois, and transported to the next camp. This mobility was essential for peoples who followed the buffalo, who had to move with the great migrations, who could not afford to be tied to permanent structures. But from ethnographic records, from the accounts written down in later centuries, when memory still held the old ways, when elders could still describe how their grandparents had lived, we know that people slept on buffalo robes, thick, heavy furs, tanned and softened, layered over each other for warmth. A single buffalo hide, properly tanned, could weigh 20 or 30 pounds. It was substantial enough to provide real insulation, real comfort. The fur side would be turned inward, against the body, while the leather side faced down. The fur trapped air, creating tiny pockets of warmth that built up body heat through the night. Multiple robes might be layered, depending on the season and the weather. In summer, one might suffice. In deep winter, 3 or 4 or even 5 might be piled on, creating a nest of warmth so effective that people could sleep comfortably even when temperatures outside dropped far below zero. The weight of the robes was considerable, but this weight itself was comforting, was part of what made sleep feel secure and restful. The teepee liner, a second layer of hide hung inside the outer covering, created a pocket of air that helped insulate against wind and cold. The liner hung from poles about 6 feet high, extending around the interior circumference of the teepee. It channeled fresh air upward while creating a dead air space between itself and the outer covering. This dead air space acted as insulation, much like a double-paned window. Wind might howl outside, might press against the outer covering, and make it billow and snap, but inside, in the space between liner and covering, the air remained relatively still, and still air cannot carry away heat as efficiently as moving air. And the placement of the sleeping area toward the back of the teepee, away from the entrance, away from drafts, shows a sophisticated understanding of how air moves, how heat is lost, how to create the most protected space possible within a temporary structure. The fire pit was central, but sleeping places radiated out from it in a deliberate arrangement. The most honored positions were at the back, opposite the door, where drafts were minimal and where one could see the entrance, important for security, for knowing who came and went. Less favored positions were nearer the door, where cold air entered each time the flap was lifted, where people passed by going in and out, where sleep was more likely to be disturbed. In some sites, archaeologists have found curious objects, small carved stones, smoothly shaped, concave on one side, or pieces of wood, similarly carved with a gentle curve. They are found in various contexts, in dwelling areas, in storage pits, sometimes in graves. They vary in size from objects that might fit in a cupped hand to larger pieces 6 or 8 inches long. The stone ones are usually made from softer stones that could be worked with available tools. Sandstone, sometimes limestone, occasionally harder materials like granite that required more skill and more time to shape. Are these pillows? Headrests? The debate continues among archaeologists, and it is the kind of debate that demonstrates how difficult it can be to interpret artifacts whose use was not documented. Some researchers believe, yes, that these objects were placed under the neck or head to provide elevation, to keep the face off the ground, to allow easier breathing. They point to similar objects used in other cultures around the world. Ancient Egypt had wooden headrests, various African cultures used carved stools as headrests, and in Asia, wooden pillows were common. The concave shape seems deliberately designed to cradle the skull or support the neck. Others argue that they served different purposes, that the stones were tools for grinding or for ceremonial use, that the wood pieces were parts of larger objects now lost. They point out that the concave shapes could serve various purposes, as bowls, as paint palettes, as tools for working hides or processing plant materials. Without clear use-wear patterns that unambiguously indicate one function over another, certainty is impossible. The truth is, we do not know, we cannot know with certainty. The objects cannot speak, and the people who made them left no written records explaining their purpose. We can examine them, measure them, analyze the tool marks that show how they were shaped. But in the end, we are left with educated guesses, with hypotheses that cannot be definitively proven or disproven. But imagine, for a moment, that they were pillows. Imagine the person who carved one, the hours spent shaping the stone, smoothing it, finding just the right curve. Perhaps they worked on it over many evenings, sitting by the fire after the day's work was done, patiently abrading the stone with sand or with another, harder stone, slowly achieving the shape they wanted. Perhaps they had a specific user in mind, themselves, or a spouse, or a child. Perhaps the act of making it was itself a meditation, a way of showing care, of trying to make life slightly easier for someone they loved. And imagine the person who used it, lying down at night, placing their head on that hard, smooth surface. Is it comfortable? Not really. Not compared to modern pillows, not compared to the soft support we take for granted, but it lifts the head away from the ground, away from insects and moisture. It provides a small degree of elevation that makes breathing easier, that prevents the stiff neck that comes from sleeping completely flat. It is something. It is better than nothing. And perhaps, over time, one grew accustomed to it. Perhaps it became familiar, even preferred. Perhaps sleep felt incomplete without it. These objects, real or imagined as pillows, speak to a desire for comfort, for ease. They speak to the human impulse to improve one's conditions, even in small ways, even when resources are limited. Throughout human history, in every culture, people have sought to make sleep more comfortable. Not everyone succeeded to the same degree. Comfort has always been unevenly distributed, a function of wealth and status and circumstance. But the desire itself is universal. The impulse to place something beneath one's head, to create some small barrier between oneself and the hardness of the ground, this impulse crosses all cultural boundaries. In various sites across North America, archaeologists have found evidence of plant use connected to sleeping areas, traces of specific pollens concentrated in areas where dwelling floors once existed, residues on pottery fragments found near hearths or sleeping platforms, burnt remains in fire pits that can be identified through microscopic analysis and comparison with modern specimens. The patterns are suggestive, though like everything in archaeology, they require careful interpretation. Some of these plants are known to have sedative properties. Valerian root, or species similar to it, which contains compounds that interact with the nervous system to produce calming effects. Passion flower, which has been used for centuries in various cultures to treat anxiety and sleeplessness. Hops, in some regions before their primary use shifted to beer making. Chamomile-like flowers, various species that produce aromatic compounds with mild sedative effects. The presence of these plants in domestic contexts, particularly concentrated in sleeping areas, suggests deliberate use. Were these plants used deliberately to promote sleep, to calm anxious minds, to ease the transition from waking to rest? Again, we can only speculate. But the evidence suggests that people understood, through generations of observation and experimentation, which plants could soothe, which could heal, which could alter consciousness. This knowledge was empirical, built up through trial and error, through paying attention to effects, through sharing observations within communities and across generations. Plants that cause drowsiness would have been noticed. Someone preparing a meal with certain herbs might have observed that people became sleepy afterward. Someone gathering plants might have noticed that handling certain species made them feel calm or relaxed. Over time, these observations would accumulate, would be tested and refined, would become part of the collective knowledge that communities relied on. Other plants were used differently. Sweetgrass, for instance, burned as a smudge, filling the air with its distinctive scent. The grass was harvested, dried, braided into long plats that could be stored for months or even years. When needed, a piece would be broken off, lit, then allowed to smolder, producing thick, aromatic smoke. The purpose was spiritual, certainly. Sweetgrass was considered sacred in many cultures, used in ceremonies and prayers, burned as an offering or as a way of purifying space. But the effect may have been physical as well. The ritual of burning, the deep breathing of scented smoke, the calming repetition of gesture, all of these would have helped quiet the mind, prepared the body for rest. Ritual has power beyond its spiritual meaning. The act of performing familiar gestures in familiar sequence creates a psychological transition, a signal to the mind and body that it is time to shift states, to move from the alertness of day to the receptivity of night. Sage, cedar, tobacco, all used in various ways in various cultures, as part of evening rituals, all carrying not just symbolic meaning, but practical effect. Sage smoke has antimicrobial properties which might have helped keep sleeping areas cleaner, healthier. Cedar smoke repels certain insects, providing some protection from bites. Tobacco, when burned ceremonially rather than smoked, produces a distinctive smell that becomes associated with sacred moments, with prayers, with transitions between states of being. Sleep, in these cultures, was not just a physical act. It was embedded in ritual, in belief, in the careful management of one's relationship with the spirit world. Sleep was a time of vulnerability, when the spirit might wander, when one might receive messages from ancestors or from other realms. Preparing for sleep meant preparing spiritually as well as physically. It meant prayers, offerings, gestures that acknowledged the sacred dimension of rest. Many indigenous cultures believed, and many still believe, that dreams are significant, that they are messages from ancestors, from spirits, from the land itself. That dreams are not merely random neural activity, not just the brain processing the day's events, but communications from beyond the ordinary world. That dreams can contain warnings, guidance, prophecies, healing. That to ignore dreams is to cut oneself off from crucial sources of knowledge and power. But how widely was this belief held in pre-contact times? How did it vary from culture to culture? And how did it shape the experience of sleep? These questions are difficult to answer with certainty. We have ethnographic accounts from later periods, from the 19th and 20th centuries, when anthropologists and others documented beliefs and practices. But how much had changed in the centuries following contact? How much had been adapted or lost? The historical record is incomplete, biased, filtered through the perspectives of outsiders who often misunderstood what they were observing. We know from later ethnographic accounts that some tribes had elaborate dream interpretation practices, that children were taught from a young age to remember their dreams, to share them with elders, to seek guidance in their meanings. Upon waking, a child might be asked, "What did you dream?" The dreams would be discussed, interpreted in light of the child's circumstances and the community's needs. Recurring dreams were considered especially significant. Dreams that featured animals, particularly certain powerful animals, might indicate a spiritual calling or a gift. We know that vision quests, periods of fasting, isolation, and spiritual seeking, often involved sleep deprivation or altered sleep patterns, with the goal of inducing powerful dreams or visions. A young person, often at the threshold of adulthood, would go alone into the wilderness. They would fast, sometimes for days. They would stay awake as long as possible, pushing their body and mind to the edge of endurance. In this altered state, visions might come, sometimes while still awake, sometimes in dreams that felt more real than ordinary reality. These visions could determine one's path in life, one's spiritual gifts, one's adult name and identity. We know that some individuals were considered gifted dreamers, people whose dreams were thought to have special power, special truth. Not everyone's dreams carried the same weight. Some people seemed to have a particular facility for receiving important dreams, for remembering them in vivid detail, for interpreting them accurately. These individuals might become spiritual leaders, healers, advisors. Their dreams might guide community decisions, warn of dangers, reveal locations of game or enemies. But in the archaeological record, dreams leave no trace. We cannot excavate a vision. We cannot carbon date a nightmare. We cannot find, preserved in the soil, the content of a dream that changed someone's life or shaped a community's decisions. This is one of the profound limitations of archaeology. It can reveal material culture, but not inner experience. It can show us what people made, but not what they thought or felt or imagined. What we have instead are tantalizing hints, pictographs and petroglyphs that seem to depict dream imagery, strange, hybrid creatures, floating figures, scenes that defy ordinary logic, images of beings that are part human and part animal, or that have attributes no earthly creature possesses. Representations that seem to show flight or transformation or impossible juxtapositions of elements. Are these representations of dreams or of spiritual experiences that occurred in waking states, or simply artistic imagination, the creative mind playing with possibility? We cannot know for certain, but the dreamlike quality of some images is striking, suggesting that the boundary between waking and sleeping, between ordinary and visionary reality, may have been more fluid than in modern Western culture. Modern sleep researchers have documented something interesting. In pre-industrial societies, in places without electric light, people often sleep in a biphasic or polyphasic pattern. They sleep for a few hours, wake for an hour or two in the middle of the night, then sleep again until dawn. This pattern has been observed in various places where traditional lifestyles persist, and historical records from pre-industrial Europe mention it as well. It seems to be the natural human sleep pattern when not disrupted by artificial lighting and industrial schedules. During that wakeful period in the middle of the night, people engage in quiet activities. They tend the fire, adding wood to keep it going until morning. They talk softly with family members who are also awake, sharing thoughts or worries, or simply keeping each other company. They think, pray, process the day's events in the quiet darkness. Some people use this time for intimate conversation with spouses, some for solitary reflection. The quiet hours of night, with no distractions and no demands, offer a particular quality of consciousness, not fully awake, but not asleep either, a meditative state that can bring insights or peace. Was this true for pre-contact Native American peoples? Almost certainly, though we cannot prove it definitively through archaeology alone. The rhythms of fire tending alone would have encouraged this pattern. A fire that burns all night requires periodic attention, adding wood, adjusting logs, making sure it doesn't die completely or spread dangerously. Wood burns at a certain rate depending on its type and size. A fire left completely untended for 8 or 10 hours would likely go out, especially on cold nights when it's needed most. Someone had to do this. And in doing so they would wake, move, be alert for a time, then return to sleep. It might be different people on different nights, or the same person might tend the fire regularly. But the fire's needs would structure sleep patterns, would create natural intervals of waking. Moreover, without artificial light, the human body naturally attunes itself to lunar cycles. Full moon nights are brighter, sleep is lighter, people wake more easily and more often. The moon shining through smoke holes or doorways, casting shadows and creating enough light to see by, makes deep sleep less likely. New moon nights are darker, sleep is deeper, undisturbed by changes in light. These lunar rhythms would have been much more noticeable without electric lights to override them. So sleep in this world was not a single unbroken block. It was fluid, responsive, shaped by necessity and by nature. It moved in waves, in cycles, in patterns that varied by season and circumstance. This doesn't mean it was worse than modern consolidated sleep, just different. Perhaps in some ways it was better, allowing for those quiet, wakeful periods that modern life rarely provides. When archaeologists examine ancient sleeping sites, they often note the placement of dwellings relative to water sources, to forest edges, to open areas. These placements were not random. They reflected careful consideration of multiple factors, the weighing of advantages and disadvantages, the accumulated wisdom of generations who had learned, sometimes through bitter experience, where to build and where to avoid. Water was necessary, absolutely essential for human life. But sleeping too close to a stream meant noise, the constant rush of water that might mask the approach of danger, whether human enemies or predatory animals. It also meant increased dampness, increased cold. Water evaporates constantly from streams, raising humidity levels in the immediate vicinity. In cold weather, this moisture makes the air feel colder, and damp cold penetrates more deeply than dry cold. It also meant increased insect populations, mosquitoes, flies, gnats, all the insects that breed in or near water and make sleep difficult. The forest edge provided materials, wood for construction and fuel, plants for food and medicine, game animals, but it also harbored predators, bears, wolves, mountain lions, depending on the region. Sleeping too deep in the forest meant vulnerability, meant limited visibility, meant less warning if danger approached. Open areas provided visibility, security, the ability to see approaching threats from a distance, but they also meant exposure to wind and weather, less shelter from storms, greater temperature extremes. Trees moderate weather, blocking wind and providing shade. Without them, one faces the full force of elements. So settlements were placed carefully, balancing multiple needs, perhaps on a slight rise near water but not right at the water's edge, perhaps at the edge of forest clearings rather than deep within forest or completely in the open. And within those settlements, individual dwellings were oriented with attention to drainage, to wind direction, to sunlight. Doors facing away from prevailing winds. Locations chosen to avoid low spots where cold air and water would accumulate. Sites selected for how the sun would strike them at different times of year. But even with careful placement, the night was never silent, never fully safe. The sounds of the night, owls, wolves, coyotes, insects, wind, rain, the crack of a branch, were constant companions to sleep. People learned to distinguish between ordinary sounds and threatening ones. They learned to sleep through some noises while remaining alert to others. An owl hooting in the distance was normal, no cause for concern. But certain other sounds, a particular quality in a wolf's howl, the snap of a large branch that suggested something heavy moving through the forest, the sudden silence of insects that indicated a predator nearby, these would trigger immediate waking, immediate alertness. This is a skill that develops over a lifetime. Children, startled at every sound, eventually became adults who could discern, even in sleep, what required attention and what did not. The brain learns to filter, to ignore the routine while remaining vigilant for the unusual. Modern people who live in cities develop similar skills, learning to sleep through traffic noise and sirens while still waking to unusual sounds in their own apartment. But it meant that sleep was always, at some level, a state of partial vigilance. The body at rest, but the mind still listening, still alert, still ready to wake if necessary. True deep sleep, the kind where one is completely unconscious and unresponsive, was probably rare and brief. Most sleep was lighter, more responsive to stimuli. In some sites, archaeologists find evidence of violence. Skeletons with trauma wounds, skulls crushed by blows, arrows embedded in bone, cut marks from bladed weapons, burn layers suggesting raids or attacks, showing that structures were set on fire with people possibly still inside. Fortifications, palisades, defensive structures that make clear that threats were real and significant. Some Pueblo sites are located in positions that are defensible but terribly inconvenient, on mesa tops that require difficult climbs to access, or in cliff faces where every bit of water and supplies had to be carried up steep paths. What does this tell us about sleep? That it was, at times, genuinely dangerous. That the fear of attack was not paranoia, but reality. That some peoples lived in states of ongoing conflict or threat, where letting down one's guard could mean death. The archaeological evidence shows that violence was part of life for many pre-contact peoples, that conflict over resources, over territory, over grievances real and perceived, could and did turn deadly. Some cultures responded by sleeping in larger groups, in communal structures where many families shared space. The longhouses of the Iroquois, for instance, could house dozens of people. These structures were sometimes over 100 feet long, housing multiple families in a single shared space. This provided security, many eyes, many ears, strength in numbers. An attack on such a structure would wake everyone at once, providing defenders and making surprise difficult. It also provided warmth through shared body heat and shared fires, and it reinforced social bonds through constant proximity. Other cultures built their dwellings in defensible locations. Cliff dwellings like those at Mesa Verde, accessed only by ladders that could be drawn up. Mesa-top pueblos that could be seen approaching from miles away. Villages surrounded by wooden palisades with guarded entrances and positions for defenders. These defenses required enormous labor to construct and maintain, but they provided real security, making attacks more difficult and less likely to succeed. But even these measures could not provide complete safety. Palisades could be breached, cliff dwellings could be besieged, their water sources cut off. Surprise attacks at dawn when sleep was deepest and vigilance lowest could overcome even the best defenses, and so sleep remained tinged with vulnerability, with the awareness that darkness could bring danger. One of the things we can never fully recover is the soundscape of the pre-contact night, the exact chorus of insects, the calls of animals, the rustling of plants in wind. Some species have gone extinct since then. The passenger pigeon, once so numerous it darkened skies for hours when flocks passed overhead, is gone entirely. Its calls, whatever they sounded like, are lost forever. The Carolina parakeet, the only parrot native to the eastern United States, is extinct. Various other species have disappeared or have drastically reduced their ranges. Some have changed their ranges significantly. Species have moved north or south, east or west, in response to climate shifts, habitat changes, human pressures. The soundscape of a particular region today might be quite different from what it was 500 or 1,000 years ago. The landscape itself has been altered, forests cleared, rivers dammed, prairies ploughed. This changes which animals live where, which insects breed in which habitats, which birds nest in which trees. The night sounds that once filled certain places have been replaced by different sounds or by silence. But we can imagine. We can close our eyes and try to hear it, based on what we know of species that still exist, of habitats that remain, of accounts from early European observers who described the wilderness they encountered. The deep, resonant hoot of a great horned owl, a sound that carries far on still night air. The yipping chorus of coyotes in the distance, rising and falling in complex harmonies. The buzz and chirp of countless insects, crickets with their rhythmic pulsing, katydids with their distinctive buzzing, frogs at the water's edge contributing their own calls to the symphony. The rustle of leaves, the creak of branches swaying in breeze, the soft pad of a deer's hooves on forest floor, the splash of a beaver entering water, all of these sounds weaving together into a tapestry of night that people learn to read, to interpret, to find either comforting or concerning depending on context. And in winter, a different soundscape. The profound silence of snow falling, of snow lying deep and muffling all sound. The crack of ice forming on water, sharp reports that echo through the cold air. The howl of wind, driving snow before it, finding every crack and opening. The distant, eerie call of a wolf, perhaps answering the call of packmates, perhaps declaring territory. These winter sounds had their own meanings, their own emotional resonance. These sounds shaped sleep. They became part of the nightly ritual, part of the texture of rest. They were familiar, expected, even comforting in their predictability. The brain learned to categorize them, to accept them as normal, to filter them into the background of consciousness, until they weren't. Until an unfamiliar sound cut through, then the body tensed, the heart raced, and sleep fled. A sound that was wrong, that didn't fit the pattern, that suggested something out of place. This might be a false alarm, might be nothing, but it might be danger, and in a world without police or emergency services, without hospitals or security systems, vigilance was the price of survival. Physical anthropology provides another window into sleep. By examining skeletal remains, researchers can identify signs of chronic stress, of poor nutrition, of hard labor, all factors that would have affected the quality of rest. Bones preserve evidence of how bodies were used, what stresses they endured, what diseases afflicted them. Many skeletons show evidence of arthritis, of joint problems, of spinal compression. These conditions would have made sleeping on hard surfaces even more uncomfortable. They would have caused pain that interrupted sleep, that made rest incomplete. A person with severe arthritis in the hips might have struggled to find any position that didn't hurt. Someone with spinal problems might have woken frequently as compressed nerves sent jolts of pain through their body. These were not rare conditions. Skeletal evidence shows that arthritis and joint problems were extremely common, affecting people even in their 30s and 40s, not just the elderly. Some skeletons show evidence of healed injuries, broken bones, wounds. These, too, would have affected sleep during the healing process. Pain, stiffness, the inability to find a comfortable position. A broken rib, for instance, makes breathing painful for weeks. Lying down makes it worse, as does any twisting or turning. Sleep would have been fragmented, difficult, never fully restful, until healing was complete. And without modern pain medication, there was little to do but endure, and some skeletons show evidence of disease, infections, tuberculosis, other conditions that would have caused night fevers, night sweats, coughing, restlessness. Tuberculosis was common in many populations, and its symptoms often worsen at night. The coughing, the fever, the difficulty breathing, all of these would have made sleep nearly impossible during acute phases of the disease. Sleep, for many, was not just inconvenient. It was genuinely difficult, made worse by the physical toll of daily life. Bodies worn down by constant labor, by inadequate nutrition during lean times, by injuries that never fully healed, by diseases that had no cure. These bodies did not rest easy. Yet people survived, they healed, they rested enough to continue. The human body is remarkably resilient, remarkably adaptive. It can function on less sleep than we might think possible. It can heal despite poor conditions. It can endure discomfort and pain and still somehow find moments of rest deep enough to sustain life. One question that haunts researchers: how did people survive the coldest nights? In northern regions, the Great Lakes, the northern plains, the northeastern woodlands, winter temperatures can drop far below zero, 20 below, 30 below, even colder during the worst cold snaps. Without modern insulation, without central heating, without the ability to simply turn up a thermostat, how did people stay warm enough to sleep? The answer involves multiple strategies. Fire, of course, kept burning through the night, tended in shifts. Someone had to stay awake at least partially to add wood every hour or two. Let the fire die completely, and restarting it would be difficult, especially in extreme cold. And even with fire, the heat distribution in a dwelling would be uneven. Close to the fire, it might be quite warm, even uncomfortably hot. But farther away, in the corners and along the walls, cold would creep in. Body heat, sleeping close together, sharing warmth. Families would huddle, children between adults, everyone contributing to and benefiting from the collective warmth. Multiple people under the same buffalo robes or blankets, their combined body heat creating a microclimate that could remain comfortable even when the surrounding air was frigid. This required accepting a lack of personal space, accepting the press of bodies, the sounds and smells of others in intimate proximity. Privacy was a luxury that cold weather didn't permit. Furs and hides, layered, wrapped, creating insulation. The best furs were from winter-killed animals when their coats were thickest and most insulating. Buffalo, bear, beaver all provided excellent warmth. Deer and elk were good too, though less insulating than the thicker furs. These would be layered, perhaps a deer hide underneath, then blankets or woven coverings, then a buffalo robe on top, creating multiple layers that trapped air and held in warmth. But even with all of these strategies, some nights must have been brutally cold. Some nights must have been spent shivering, unable to truly rest, waiting for dawn. Nights when the wind howled and found every gap in the walls, every imperfection in the construction. Nights when the cold was so severe that breath froze in the air, when water left in containers froze solid, when the fire struggled to provide enough heat, no matter how much wood was fed to it. Did people die of exposure? Almost certainly. The very young, the very old, the sick, those most vulnerable to cold, would have been at risk during the harshest winters. Infants who couldn't yet regulate their own body temperature effectively. Elderly people whose circulation was poor, whose bodies no longer generated heat efficiently. Sick people whose illnesses made them more susceptible to cold. Some winters, some years, would have been worse than others. Years when food was scarce and bodies were weakened. Years when unusual cold snaps pushed temperatures to extremes. And yet, communities survived. Year after year, generation after generation, they adapted, they endured, they found ways to make it through. They developed techniques, strategies, knowledge that was passed down and refined. They learned which construction methods provided the best insulation. They learned how to position dwellings for maximum protection from wind. They learned which furs were warmest, which wood burned longest, which foods provided the most energy for maintaining body temperature. This speaks to a kind of toughness that modern life does not require, a physical and mental resilience forged by necessity. Modern people, most of us anyway, have never experienced truly life-threatening cold. We've never had to sleep knowing that if the fire goes out, we might not wake up. We've never had to make the calculations that our ancestors made, how much wood is left, how many more hours until dawn, whether to wake someone else to help tend the fire, or try to manage it ourselves. Here is the central mystery. What did it feel like? Not the objective physical conditions which we can describe and analyze, but the subjective experience, the inner texture of sleep in that time, in that world. We can describe the physical conditions, we can list the challenges, we can imagine intellectually what sleep might have been like, but we cannot truly know the subjective experience. We cannot know what it felt like to be a person in that time, lying down at night, closing your eyes, surrendering to sleep. Was it peaceful? Did people feel secure, surrounded by family, by community, by familiar sounds and familiar routines? Did the hardness of the sleeping surface fade into the background as exhaustion took over? Did the body, adapted through a lifetime of such conditions, find comfort where we would find only discomfort? Or was it anxious? Did people lie awake worrying about the things that threaten survival, food supplies running low, the health of a child, tensions with neighboring groups, the weather? Did every sound in the night trigger a spike of adrenaline, a moment of fear, before recognition brought relief? Did sleep feel like a dangerous surrender of control, a necessary risk rather than a welcome rest? Did people think about their dreams as they drifted off? Did they pray, speaking silently to ancestors or spirits, asking for protection through the night, asking for helpful dreams, asking for guidance? Or did they simply let exhaustion take them, falling into sleep without ceremony or thought? Did they feel safe, surrounded by family? Or did they feel vulnerable, aware of dangers both real and imagined? Even in the most secure settlements, surrounded by loved ones, there must have been nights when fear kept sleep at bay. Nights after hearing news of attacks elsewhere. Nights when someone was sick and might not survive. Nights when personal fears and sorrows made rest impossible. Did sleep feel like a gift, a respite from the hardships of daily life, a time when the body could repair itself, when the mind could rest from constant vigilance, when dreams might bring messages or insights? Or did it feel like another burden, another discomfort in a life full of discomforts? Another challenge to endure rather than a blessing to embrace? The answer, of course, is probably all of these things. Sleep was not one experience but many, varying by person, by season, by circumstance, by one's age and health and temperament, by whether times were good or hard, whether the community was at peace or in conflict, whether one's personal life was happy or troubled. Some nights were good. Nights when the weather was mild, when food was plentiful, when all was well with family and friends. Nights when sleep came easily and dreams were pleasant. Nights when one woke feeling rested and ready for the day. These nights would have been remembered, cherished, held up as examples of how things should be. Some were terrible. Nights of pain, of fear, of cold so severe that rest was impossible. Nights spent nursing a sick child, wondering if they would survive until morning. Nights after violence or loss, when grief made sleep elusive and when it came brought only nightmares. These nights would have been endured, survived, hopefully not repeated too often. Most were somewhere in between. Neither particularly good nor particularly bad, just ordinary nights with ordinary sleep in ordinary circumstances, the bread and butter of existence, unremarkable but essential. These nights left no stories, generated no special memories, but they were the foundation of life. They were what made it possible to continue day after day, year after year, just like now, just like always. The fundamental experience of being human hasn't changed as much as we might think. We still lie down at night. We still close our eyes. We still hope for rest and peace and safety. We still wake to face another day. The external conditions have changed dramatically. Our beds are softer, our rooms warmer, our threats different. But the basic vulnerability of sleep, the basic need for rest, the basic hope for tomorrow, these remain constant across time. There is something valuable in not knowing, in acknowledging the limits of archaeology, of history, of our ability to reconstruct the past, in accepting that some things are forever lost, that some experiences cannot be fully recovered or understood from the outside. It keeps us humble. It reminds us that the people of the past were complex, individual, fully human, not just data points or generic representatives of their culture. Each person who slept in these ancient dwellings had their own thoughts, their own fears, their own hopes and dreams. Each one was a unique consciousness experiencing the world in their own way. They were not abstractions, not symbols, but real people with inner lives as rich and complex as our own. It invites us to imagine, to wonder, to sit with questions that have no definitive answers. This kind of wondering is valuable in itself. It exercises our empathy, our ability to imagine lives different from our own. It reminds us that certainty is not always possible, that sometimes the most honest answer is, I don't know. What herbs did Otsitsa gather to help her brother sleep? We don't know. We can list plants that might have been available, that might have been used, but we cannot know which ones she chose or why, what knowledge guided her hands, what success or failure resulted. What did the dreams of a plains hunter look like? We can't say. We cannot enter another person's dreams, cannot see through their eyes or feel through their heart. Dreams are private, internal, unique to each dreamer. Even when shared and described, they lose something in translation. What it feels like to dream, that immediate, visceral experience, cannot be fully communicated or recovered. What lullabies did Cherokee mothers sing? Lost to time. The melodies, the words, the tone of voice, the way a child would have heard them drifting off to sleep, all gone. Perhaps some fragments were written down later, but even those are translations, approximations, pale shadows of the living tradition. But in the spaces between what we know and what we don't know, there is room for something else, for respect, for humility, for a kind of communion across time, an acknowledgement that we are connected to these people, that we share with them the basic human experience of lying down at night and hoping for rest. We are not so different from them. Our technology has changed, our circumstances have changed, but our fundamental needs and experiences remain remarkably similar. We still need sleep. We still struggle sometimes to find it. We still dream, though we may interpret our dreams differently. We still seek comfort, security, peace. We still wake with worries, with hopes, with plans for the day ahead. Imagine holding one of those carved stone pillows. Feel its weight in your hands, its coolness against your palm, its smooth surface worn by centuries. Run your fingers over the concave curve, the gentle depression that might have cradled a human head night after night. Someone made this. Someone sat down with a rough piece of stone and a vision of what it could become. They spent hours, perhaps many hours, perhaps days or weeks, working the stone, shaping it, smoothing it. They had a specific purpose in mind, comfort perhaps, or ceremony, or something we can't even guess. They brought skill to the task, knowledge of how stone breaks and chips and wears. They brought patience, the willingness to work slowly toward a goal. They brought care, the desire to make something well. And then, for years, perhaps for a lifetime, this object was used. It bore the weight of a human head, night after night, year after year. It absorbed the warmth of a living body, the oils from skin and hair, the pressure of rest. It was part of someone's nightly ritual, as familiar to them as your own pillow is to you. They would have reached for it automatically, positioned it without thinking, found their preferred angle and placement through long habit. Perhaps they thought about it sometimes, perhaps they appreciated it, remembered the work that went into making it, felt grateful for its small contribution to comfort. Or perhaps it simply faded into the background of daily life, becoming invisible through familiarity, noticed only if it was missing, and now it sits in a museum case or in a storage box or in an archaeologist's careful hands, a mystery, a question, a fragment of a life we can glimpse but never fully know. It has outlasted its maker by centuries. It has outlasted the culture that produced it. It remains when everything else, the voice of its maker, the feel of their hands, the thoughts in their mind, has vanished utterly. This is the strange, beautiful melancholy of archaeology. We touch the past, but we cannot hold it. We see evidence of lives fully lived, but we cannot meet the people who lived them. We can only honor them, remember them, try to understand as best we can the shape of their days and the texture of their nights. What can we learn from this fragmentary evidence? What wisdom might we take from the sleeping practices of pre-contact peoples? These are not easy questions, and any answers must be tentative, suggestive, rather than prescriptive. But perhaps there are lessons here, insights that speak across centuries. Perhaps this, that comfort is relative. What seems unbearable to us might have seemed acceptable, even good, in another context. The human body and mind are capable of adapting to conditions that seem impossible. We are more resilient, more flexible, more capable of endurance than we might think. This doesn't mean we should romanticize hardship or seek out discomfort unnecessarily, but it might mean we could worry less about perfect conditions, could accept less than ideal circumstances with more grace. Perhaps this, that sleep is not just a physical act, but a spiritual one. That how we approach rest matters. That ritual, mindfulness, connection to place and community, all of these enrich the experience of sleep, even when the physical conditions are harsh. Modern sleep advice often focuses exclusively on physical factors, mattress quality, room temperature, darkness, quiet. But perhaps there's wisdom in also considering the spiritual and communal dimensions of rest. Perhaps this, that we have lost something in our modern pursuit of perfect comfort, that in trying to eliminate all discomfort, all risk, all vulnerability, we have also lost some connection to the rhythms of nature, to the wisdom of our bodies, to the value of endurance. Modern life insulates us from cold, from darkness, from the sounds of the natural world. We control our environment to a degree that would have seemed miraculous to our ancestors. But in that control, we have also lost something, a certain aliveness, a certain presence, a certain connection to the fundamental conditions of existence. Not that we should romanticize hardship, Not that we should wish for cold nights and hard ground. The suffering was real, the discomfort was real, the dangers were real. We should not pretend otherwise, should not imagine that past peoples lived in some kind of harmonious bliss. They suffered, they struggled, they died young more often than not. Their lives were in many ways brutal and difficult. But perhaps we should remember that sleep throughout most of human history was not the isolated, controlled, perfectly comfortable experience we now expect. It was communal, it was vulnerable, it was woven into the fabric of life. It was something that happened in relationship, to family, to community, to the natural world, to the spiritual realm. It was not a solitary retreat into unconsciousness, but a social and spiritual practice. And people not only survived, they thrived. They created art, stunning in its beauty and complexity. They built communities, intricate in their social structures and relationships. They raised children, passing down knowledge and culture through generations. They laughed and loved and dreamed. They had joy, had meaning, had purpose. Sleep was hard, life was hard, but both were also rich with meaning, with connection, with purpose. Perhaps that richness came partly from the difficulty, from the shared struggle, from the necessity of depending on each other for survival. Perhaps comfort, when it came, was sweeter for being rare. Perhaps rest, when it came, was more precious for being hard-won. As we drift away from this exploration of archaeology and mystery, let us carry with us the awareness of all that remains unknown, the exact softness of a moss bed, its particular texture and scent, the specific plants used in a particular region, gathered by particular hands, prepared in particular ways, the words of a prayer spoken before sleep, the tone and rhythm and meaning of those words, the content of a dream that changed someone's life, that guided a decision or revealed a truth. These things are lost, but they were real, they happened, they mattered to the people who experienced them. A moss bed might have been the most comfortable sleeping surface a particular person ever knew, and they might have spoken of it with appreciation, with gratitude. A particular plant preparation might have finally brought relief from insomnia, and the person who discovered the right combination might have been celebrated as a healer. A prayer might have brought genuine peace, genuine comfort, might have eased the transition from waking to sleep. A dream might have provided guidance in a crisis, might have saved lives, might have changed the course of history in small but significant ways. All of this really happened. All of these experiences were real, but we cannot know them directly. We can only imagine and honor and remember that they existed. And in honoring the mystery and acknowledging what we cannot know, we honor those people. We resist the temptation to flatten them into simple narratives, to make them less complex than they were. We resist the urge to turn them into symbols or types or representatives. We allow them to remain what they were, individual human beings, each with their own inner life, their own struggles and joys, their own particular way of experiencing the world. They were as human as we are. Their sleep was as varied, as complicated, as difficult, and as precious as ours. They wanted what we want: rest, security, peace. They feared what we fear: pain, danger, loss. They hoped for what we hope for: health, happiness, safety for those they loved. And somewhere in the silent earth, the traces of their rest remain, waiting, remembering, holding secrets we may never fully uncover. The earth keeps its counsel, reveals only fragments, holds back more than it gives. But those fragments are enough to tell us something important, that sleep, like all human experience, connects us across time. That the fundamental experiences of being human, the need for rest, the vulnerability of darkness, the hope for tomorrow, these have always been with us and always will be. The mats decay, the hides rot, the stones remain, but their purpose becomes obscure. The people themselves return to dust, but something persists. not in physical form, but in continuity. We lie down at night as they did, we close our eyes as they did. We surrender to sleep as they did, trusting that we will wake again, that tomorrow will come, that life will continue. And in that simple act, repeated night after night, across countless generations, we are connected to them. We share something fundamental with every human who has ever lived. And that connection, that continuity, that shared experience, this is what makes the study of ancient sleep meaningful. Not just the facts we can uncover, but the recognition that we are part of an unbroken chain of human experience, stretching back to the beginning and forward to whatever comes next. We have walked through the common life, through the daily struggles of ordinary people. We have followed Otsitsa's journey. We have wondered at the mysteries left in the earth. Now let us turn our attention to those who lived differently, to those who held power, who commanded respect, who occupied a different position in the social order. For sleep, like everything else in human societies, was not distributed equally. Let us explore what it meant to be among the elite, the chiefs, the spiritual leaders, the elders of great families, and how their nights differed from those of common people. But let us also remember, privilege is always complicated. Power brings comfort, yes, but it also brings burden. And sometimes the weight of responsibility rests heavier than the weight of poverty. In pre-contact Native American societies, the concept of elite varied enormously from culture to culture. In some societies, particularly in the Southeast among the Mississippian cultures, there were clear hierarchical structures. Chiefs who lived in larger homes, often built atop earthen mounds, families who traced their lineage back to important ancestors, who controlled access to certain resources, who made decisions that affected entire communities. In other societies, many of those in the Northeast, the Plains, the Northwest Coast, leadership was more fluid, more earned through deed than inherited through birth. But even here, some individuals stood apart. Warriors with proven courage, elders with deep knowledge, shamans who mediated between the human and spirit worlds. And there were practical differences too. Some families were simply more successful, better hunters, better farmers, better at accumulating the surplus that allowed for a margin of comfort, a buffer against hardship. So when we speak of elite, we are speaking of a spectrum, not a rigid class system like European nobility, but a recognition that within every community, some people had more resources, more authority, more access to comfort. And that included, in small but significant ways, more comfort in sleep. Let us begin with shelter, for this is where the difference becomes most visible. A chief of a Mississippian town might live in a structure built atop a flat-topped mound, earth piled high, carefully shaped, creating an elevated platform. The house itself would be larger than those of common people. Wooden posts, thick and strong, walls of woven cane plastered with clay, a roof of thatch expertly laid, shedding rain efficiently. Inside, the floor might be made of packed clay kept meticulously clean. The sleeping area might be slightly raised, a low platform of wood or packed earth covered with fine mats. In an Iroquois longhouse, the chief's family might occupy the central position, the place of honor, equidistant from both ends, closest to the main fire. Their sleeping platform would be well maintained, the furs and skins perhaps of better quality, the space around them kept clear for movement and respect. In a pueblo in the southwest, elite families might have rooms in the most protected, most comfortable parts of the structure, inner rooms insulated by surrounding chambers with better ventilation, with access to stored goods. These differences seem small perhaps. A few feet of elevation, a better location, slightly thicker walls. But in the context of survival, of nightly discomfort, these small differences mattered enormously. An ordinary person might sleep on a woven mat over bare earth with perhaps a single deer skin for covering. An elite person might have several layers, thick grasses beneath the mat, multiple hides layered for insulation and softness, perhaps even woven blankets made from plant fibers or, in some regions, from the wool of mountain goats or buffalo. They might have furs of higher quality, bear, beaver, otter, animals whose pelts were particularly warm, particularly soft, particularly valuable. They might have access to aromatic plants in greater quantities, cedar, sage, sweetgrass, burned not just for ceremony but for the simple pleasure of pleasant scent, for the psychological comfort of ritual, for the practical effect of repelling insects. In colder regions they might have better control over fire, more wood stored, attendants or family members responsible for keeping the fire burning through the night, reducing the need to wake in cold darkness to tend it themselves. These are not luxuries by modern standards, but in their context they were significant. They represented the difference between miserable sleep and merely uncomfortable sleep, between waking exhausted and waking merely tired. But let us not imagine that elite status meant easy sleep, for power carries its own burdens, its own interruptions to rest. A chief must make decisions that affect the entire community. When to plant, when to hunt, how to respond to threats from neighboring groups, how to mediate disputes within the community. These decisions weigh heavily. They follow a person into sleep, appearing in dreams, causing restlessness, producing anxiety that no amount of soft furs can ease. A spiritual leader, a shaman, a medicine person lives in constant communication with the spirit world. Their dreams are not just personal, they are public, expected to carry messages, warnings, guidance. They cannot simply sleep. They must be alert to what their dreams might reveal. Some spiritual practices required sleep deprivation, deliberate staying awake to induce visions, to open the mind to spiritual communication. Or they required sleeping in particular locations, isolated places, sacred places, places where the boundary between worlds was thought to be thin. This is not comfortable sleep. This is labor, spiritual labor, that happens in the liminal space between waking and sleeping. Let us watch a chief, a man of perhaps 40 winters, leader of a Mississippian town. His home sits atop a mound, visible from every part of the settlement. The day has been long. He has mediated a dispute between two families over land use. He has consulted with hunters about the recent scarcity of deer. He has met with representatives from a neighboring town to discuss trade. As evening approaches, he retires to his home. His wife has prepared a meal: corn, beans, squash, and fish. The food is good, more plentiful than what an ordinary family might eat, but not extravagant. Even the elite must be mindful of resources. After the meal, there are still duties. Young men come seeking his counsel. An elder arrives to discuss a dream she had, a troubling dream that might have implications for the community. He listens, offers interpretation, guidance. Finally, as full darkness settles, he can rest. His sleeping platform is covered with woven mats, soft and well made. Over these are laid 2 thick buffalo robes, their fur turned inward, creating warmth and softness. He has a pillow of sorts, a bundle of folded cloth, firm but yielding. His wife sleeps beside him. The fire in the hearth burns steadily. One of their children tends it, will tend it through the night. He lies down. His body sinks into the layered softness, not comfort by modern standards, but by the standards of his world, remarkable luxury. And yet he cannot sleep. His mind turns over the day's problems. The scarcity of deer is troubling. Is it because of overhunting? Or is it a sign of something deeper, disease among the herds, pressure from other tribes pushing game away? The neighboring town's trade offers were generous, too generous perhaps. What do they want? What are they not saying? And the elders dream a vision of birds falling from the sky. What could it mean? Illness? Warfare? Famine? He shifts, trying to find a position that allows both body and mind to rest. The buffalo robes are warm, almost too warm now. He adjusts them. Outside, an owl calls. In his culture, owls are omens. Of what? Death? Change? Wisdom? He closes his eyes. He breathes deeply, deliberately, trying to calm his thoughts. Eventually, sleep comes. But it is not deep, not restful. It is the light sleep of someone who knows they might be needed, who cannot fully let go of responsibility, even in darkness. In many indigenous cultures, the dreams of important people are considered significant, not just for the dreamer, but for the entire community. A chief's dreams might be interpreted as prophecy. A shaman's dreams might be understood as messages from ancestors or spirits. Even the dreams of respected elders carried weight, were shared and discussed and analyzed. This meant that sleep for these individuals was never entirely private. Their dreams were public property in a sense, subject to scrutiny, to interpretation, to the expectations of others. Imagine knowing that whatever you dream might be taken as guidance for important decisions, that your subconscious wanderings might be seen as divine communication. Would you sleep easily? Or would you lie awake, anxious about what you might dream, about how it might be interpreted, about the responsibility it carries? Some individuals embrace this role. They learn to cultivate certain kinds of dreams, to fast or pray or use specific plants to induce the visions they sought. But others found it burdensome. The pressure to dream correctly, to have dreams that offered clear guidance rather than confusing symbols or troubling images. Sleep, for them, was not escape. It was another arena of responsibility, another place where their role as leader or healer followed them. Let us place two people side by side, both in the same region, the same community, the same autumn night. One is Otsitsa, whom we have already met. Now in her mid-20s, a healer, a woman of some respect, but not great wealth. She sleeps in her family's modest dwelling, on a thin mat under a single deerskin. She is warm enough, familiar enough with discomfort, that she can find rest despite it. Her dreams are her own, private, meaningful to her, but not scrutinized by the community. The other is her chief, the leader of her town, a man of great responsibility. He sleeps on soft furs in a warm dwelling with attendants to keep the fire burning. By all physical measures, his sleep should be better. And yet, Otsitsa falls asleep quickly, exhausted from a long day of gathering plants, treating a child with a fever, preparing medicines. Her sleep is deep, restorative. She wakes once when her bladder demands it, slips outside into the cold night air, returns and falls immediately back into sleep. She dreams of forests and streams, of her grandmother's voice teaching her plant names. She wakes at dawn feeling rested, ready for another day. The chief lies awake for hours, his mind churning through decisions and worries. When he finally sleeps, it is fitful, broken by anxiety dreams, images of empty storage pits, of angry faces, of storms approaching. He wakes before dawn, groggy, unrested, and immediately begins thinking about the day's challenges. Which of them slept better? By one measure, the chief, his bed was softer, his surroundings more comfortable. By another measure, Otsitsa, her sleep was deeper, more restorative, less burdened by the weight of leadership. This is the paradox of privilege. Sometimes those who have more suffer differently. Not more necessarily, but differently. We should note, too, that sleep was gendered in complex ways. In many societies, women's sleep was more frequently interrupted by the needs of children, nursing infants, comforting frightened toddlers, tending to sick family members. these tasks fell primarily to women, disrupting their rest in ways that men's sleep often was not. But women also in many cultures held knowledge about sleep, about dreams, about the plants and rituals that promoted rest. They were the ones who prepared the sleeping areas, who wove the mats, who gathered the grasses. They were often the ones who interpreted children's dreams, who taught the rituals of bedtime. Among the elite, some of this burden might be eased by the presence of other family members, of elder daughters or nieces who could share the work of childcare. But the responsibility ultimately still fell on women. Men's sleep, especially among elite men, was interrupted by different concerns, by the need to maintain vigilance against attack, by the obligations of leadership, by the spiritual demands of ceremony. Neither had it easy, just differently difficult. For some elite individuals, sleep was surrounded by ritual in ways that ordinary people's sleep was not. A spiritual leader might engage in purification before sleep, bathing in cold water, smudging with sacred smoke, speaking prayers, making offerings. They might sleep in a particular position, facing a particular direction, toward the rising sun perhaps, or toward a sacred mountain. They might wear specific items, amulets, medicine bundles, that were believed to protect during sleep, to encourage prophetic dreams, to maintain spiritual connection. For some, there were taboos around sleep, restrictions on who could sleep near them, on what could be discussed before sleeping, on what foods could be eaten in the evening. These rituals added structure, added meaning, added a sense of control over the vulnerable state of sleep. But they also added complexity, added another layer of things to remember, to maintain, to worry about. A common person could simply lie down and sleep. An elite person, especially a spiritual elite, had to perform sleep correctly. Here is a strange truth. Sleep is a great equalizer. When you close your eyes, when consciousness fades, when dreams take over, in that moment, status means little. A chief and a commoner both dream, both experience the same strange logic of the sleeping mind. Both wake, sometimes, gasping from nightmares. In sleep, the body takes over. Hierarchies dissolve. The soft furs and the thin mat both support sleeping flesh, and the flesh itself cares little for social distinctions. This vulnerability was perhaps disturbing to those who held power. To know that every night they would enter a state where control was impossible, where the mind wandered freely, where the boundary between self and other, between life and death, grew thin. Some sought to manage this vulnerability through ritual, through the accumulation of comfort, through the presence of guards or attendants. But ultimately, sleep could not be fully controlled. And perhaps there was wisdom in that, a nightly reminder that power is temporary, that all humans share certain fundamental experiences, that we are more alike than different. As elite individuals aged, their relationship with sleep often changed. An old chief, his body worn by decades of responsibility, might find that sleep becomes more elusive. His bones ache more severely on even the softest bedding. He wakes frequently to urinate, to adjust position, to cope with pain that no amount of comfort can fully ease. But he might also find a certain peace. His days of making the hardest decisions might be behind him, passed to a younger successor. He can sleep later in the morning. He can nap during the day without shame. An elderly medicine woman might find that her dreams become more vivid, more strange, as she approaches the end of her life. The boundary between this world and the next grows thinner. Sleep becomes a journey, a preparation for the ultimate transition. There is a poignancy to this, the idea that as the body weakens, sleep becomes both more difficult and more profound. That rest becomes more necessary, even as it becomes more fragile. One aspect of elite sleep that we might not immediately consider: potential loneliness. A chief might sleep in a larger dwelling with more space, more privacy. But privacy can mean isolation. the comfort of bodies pressed close together, of shared warmth, of family breathing in unison. This might be sacrificed for the status of separate sleeping areas. We do not know how often this occurred, but it is worth considering that sometimes elite sleep might have been physically more comfortable but emotionally more solitary. The trade-off between comfort and connection is not straightforward, and what seems like a privilege, privacy, space, quiet, might also carry a cost. What can we learn from examining elite sleep compared to common sleep? Perhaps this, that comfort is complex, that physical ease does not automatically translate to restful sleep, that the burdens of the mind can outweigh the softness of the bed. Perhaps this, that every social position carries its own challenges, that we should not romanticize either poverty or power, but instead recognize that human struggle takes many forms. Perhaps this, that in some fundamental ways we are all the same. We all need rest. We all fear the night. We all dream and wake and try again to sleep. The differences matter. They shaped individual lives in profound ways. But the similarities matter too. They connect us across time, across culture, across the boundaries of status and power. As we prepare to leave this segment, let us hold one last image. It is deep winter. The cold is brutal, penetrating. Snow has fallen for days. In a modest wigwam, a family huddles together for warmth. The fire is small, carefully tended, for wood is precious. They sleep in a pile of bodies, parents, children, grandparents, sharing heat, sharing breath. The cold presses in from all sides, but their collective warmth holds it at bay. They shift and adjust throughout the night, unconsciously cooperating to maximize shared warmth. In a chief's dwelling atop a mound, a man sleeps under thick firs near a fire that burns large and bright. He is physically comfortable, warm enough that he has even pushed one of the robes partially aside. But he sleeps alone. His wife has gone to tend a sick relative. And in his aloneness, in the large space around him, there is a certain coldness that no fire can touch. Which is better? The question itself may be flawed. They are simply different experiences of the same winter night, the same human need for rest and warmth and safety. Both are valid. Both are fully human. Both carry their own form of hardship and their own form of grace. By examining elite sleep, we gain perspective on common sleep. We see that the struggles of ordinary people were real, were difficult, but were not necessarily worse in every way than the struggles of the powerful. We see that having more does not solve all problems, that some burdens increase with status rather than decrease. We see that sleep throughout human history and across social divisions has been complicated, shaped by physical conditions, yes, but also by mental state, by responsibility, by relationships, by the stories we tell ourselves about what rest means and why it matters. And we see that in the end we all lie down under the same sky, close our eyes in the same darkness, surrender to the same mysterious process by which consciousness fades and dreams arise. The firs may differ, the location may vary, but the fundamental act, the closing of eyes, the slowing of breath, the letting go, this is universal. This is what we share. This is what connects a chief in a Mississippian town to Otsitsa in her wigwam to you now listening to this story. We all sleep, we all dream, we all wake to another day. And in that simple pattern, repeated night after night across millennia, there is a strange beauty, a reminder of our common humanity, our shared vulnerability, our collective need for rest. We have traveled far together, you and I, back through centuries into worlds that no longer exist except in fragments, in the earth, in memory, in the stories we piece together from what remains. We have felt the cold of the ground, the weight of exhaustion, the texture of woven mats and deerskin blankets. We have walked with Otsitsa through her days and nights, through crisis and care, and the slow accumulation of wisdom. We have wondered at mysteries we cannot solve, at questions the earth keeps locked in silence. We have seen how sleep was different for those with power, and yet how, in the end, it was also the same. Now it is time to come home, to this moment, to this night, to wherever you are listening to these words. Let us reflect gently on what we have learned, on what these distant nights might teach us about our own. In the world we have visited, sleep was not guaranteed. It was not comfortable by our standards. It was interrupted by cold, by hunger, by the needs of children, by the howl of wind, by the proximity of danger. And yet people slept. They found rest. They dreamed their dreams and woke to another day and continued. There is something humbling in this. We, with our climate-controlled homes, our soft mattresses, our abundance of blankets and pillows, we sometimes lie awake anyway, troubled by concerns that would seem trivial in that older world. This is not to diminish our struggles. Anxiety is real, whatever its source. Pain is pain, whether it comes from a stone beneath your hip or from a mind that will not quiet. But perhaps there is perspective to be gained. Perhaps we can recognize that the human capacity for rest is more resilient than we sometimes believe. That comfort, while pleasant, is not the only path to sleep. That sometimes the mind's state matters more than the body's conditions. The people we have visited tonight did not have the luxury of perfect circumstances. They worked with what they had. They adapted. They found ways to rest, even when rest was difficult. We carry this same capacity, this same resilience. When we lie awake, worrying, we might remember humans have been lying awake worrying for millennia, and humans have been finding sleep anyway, finding rest, finding the strength to begin again. One thing that stands out from our journey, how rarely people slept alone. Families clustered together, bodies pressed close for warmth, the breathing of others providing a rhythm, a reassurance, the presence of loved ones offering safety, or at least the illusion of safety, which, in the darkness, is nearly as valuable. In our modern world, we often sleep alone, or only with a partner. Children are placed in separate rooms, families spread out across separate floors, privacy is prized, space is desired. But perhaps something is lost in this isolation. Perhaps there is wisdom in the old way, the knowledge that sleep is vulnerable, and vulnerability is easier to bear when it is shared. The sound of another's breathing, the warmth of another body nearby, the simple reassurance of not being alone in the dark. These are not small things, they are fundamental to the human experience of rest. If you are listening alone tonight in a quiet room, you might pause for a moment and send your thoughts to all the other people, scattered across the world, who are also lying in darkness, also seeking sleep. You are part of a vast, invisible community. All of us closing our eyes, all of us surrendering to the night. You are not alone, even in your aloneness. Throughout our journey, we have seen how sleep was woven together with spirituality, with ritual, with meaning beyond the merely physical. Dreams were messages. Darkness was sacred. The transition from waking to sleeping was a threshold, a boundary between worlds. We have largely lost this. For most of us, sleep is simply a biological necessity. We lie down, we close our eyes, we wake up. If we dream, we often forget. If we wake in the night, it is an annoyance, not a message. But perhaps we could reclaim some of that older awareness, not in a forced or artificial way, but simply by paying attention, by noticing the moment when wakefulness begins to fade, by treating our sleeping space with some small measure of reverence, by considering that dreams, even if not divine messages, are at least our mind's way of processing, of healing, of making sense of the day. Sleep is ordinary, but it is also extraordinary. Every night we willingly enter a state of profound vulnerability. We let go of control. we allow our consciousness to dissolve into something stranger, less rational, more fluid. This is a kind of faith, a trust in the process, in our body's wisdom, in the basic safety of surrendering to rest. The people we have visited tonight understood this. They approached sleep with ritual, with awareness, with respect for what it represented. We might do the same. A small ritual before bed, a few deep breaths, a moment of gratitude, a simple acknowledgement that we are about to enter the mystery once more. Nothing elaborate, nothing forced, just a gentle recognition that sleep is more than nothing, that it matters, that it is, in its own quiet way, sacred. Now consider where you are, the surface beneath you, soft, yielding, designed for comfort, the temperature, controlled, adjusted to your preference. The blankets, plentiful, warm, clean, the pillow supporting your head at just the right angle. These are gifts, extraordinary gifts really, though we rarely think of them that way. A person from the world we have visited, transported to your bedroom, would be astounded, would think themselves in some kind of paradise. All this softness, all this warmth, all this control over the environment. And yet, we still sometimes struggle to sleep. We lie in our comfortable beds and worry about jobs, relationships, health, the future. We scroll through phones, stimulating our minds when we should be quieting them. We take our comfort for granted and focus on what we lack rather than what we have. This is not a criticism, it is simply the human condition. We adapt to whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, and then we seek more, or we worry anyway, or we find new problems to replace the old ones. But tonight, just for a moment, let us appreciate the contrast. Let us recognize that we have been given something that most humans throughout history could only dream of, a warm, safe, comfortable place to rest. This does not solve all our problems, but it is not nothing. It is, in fact, quite extraordinary. One of the hidden lessons from our journey, the people we visited did not have to earn their rest. They did not lie awake thinking, I didn't accomplish enough today, I don't deserve to sleep. Rest was necessary, rest was assumed. When darkness came, you slept because sleep was required for survival. It was not a reward for productivity, it was simply part of the rhythm of life. Somewhere along the way, many of us have internalized a different message. That rest must be earned, that we must do enough, be enough, achieve enough before we have permission to stop, to relax, to surrender, to sleep. But this is a lie. A modern lie, perhaps, but a lie nonetheless. You deserve rest simply because you are alive, because you are human, because your body needs it, and your mind needs it, and your spirit needs it. You do not have to earn it. You do not have to justify it. You simply need it. So tonight, as you lie down, whether now or later, whether you are already in bed or still sitting, listening, give yourself permission. Permission to rest. Permission to stop thinking, stop worrying, stop trying to solve everything. The problems will still be there tomorrow, but for now, for these hours of darkness, you are allowed to let them go. You are allowed to rest. In the world we visited, dreams mattered. They were attended to, discussed, interpreted, valued. What might it mean to bring some of that attention back? Not in a superstitious way, not imagining that every dream is a prophecy, but simply by paying attention, by noticing, by letting dreams have some space in our waking consciousness. When you wake from a dream, whether in the middle of the night or in the morning, take a moment before it fades. Notice how you feel. Notice any images that linger. You do not have to analyze them. You do not have to assign meaning. Just notice. Dreams are your mind's way of working through things, of processing emotions, memories, experiences, of making connections that your waking mind might miss. They are valuable even when they seem nonsensical, especially when they seem nonsensical. So let yourself dream tonight. Let the strange logic of sleep take over. Let your mind wander where it needs to go. And if you remember any of it in the morning, consider it a gift. A small message from the deeper parts of yourself, offering something, you may not know what, and that is fine. Just let it be. Let the dreams come. Let them do their work. We live in a world of constant light. Street lights, screen lights, artificial brightness that pushes back the darkness at every opportunity. But darkness is not the enemy. Darkness is necessary. It is the condition for rest, for deep sleep, for the body's restoration. The people we visited tonight lived with real darkness. Darkness so complete that you could not see your hand in front of your face. Darkness filled with sounds, with mystery, with a kind of presence that we rarely experience now. And yes, that darkness could be frightening, but it could also be peaceful, comforting even. The darkness that says, you cannot work now, you cannot do anything now, you can only rest. Tonight, if possible, let your sleeping space be dark. Turn off the screens, draw the curtains. Let the darkness settle around you like a blanket. Let it remind you that this is the time for rest, that the world of light and action and doing will return with the sun, but for now, you are held in the darkness. You are safe in the darkness. You can let go in the darkness. Darkness is not emptiness. It is fullness, the fullness of possibility, the fullness of rest, the fullness of dreams waiting to be born. Welcome it, trust it, let it hold you. For thousands of years, humans have been doing exactly what you are about to do. Lying down at the end of the day, closing their eyes, letting sleep take them, in wigwams and longhouses, in pueblos and teepees, in structures whose names we do not even know, whose forms have vanished completely from the earth. They lay down under the same moon you see tonight, beneath the same stars. They breathed the same air, felt the same pull of exhaustion, experienced the same relief as consciousness finally faded. You are part of this rhythm, this ancient, endless rhythm of waking and sleeping, day and night, light and dark. When you close your eyes tonight, you join that long procession. All those people, all those nights, all those quiet surrenders to rest. You are not alone. You have never been alone. You are held by time itself, by the pattern that has sustained human life since the beginning. This is your place. This is your moment. This is your turn to rest. And so, friend, we come to the end of our journey together. We have traveled far through time and space and the quiet landscapes of memory and imagination. We have felt the discomfort of cold ground and the weight of worry. We have seen how people coped, how they adapted, how they found rest, even when rest was hard. We have learned, perhaps, that comfort is complex, that sleep is more than just physical, that rest is both ordinary and sacred, both simple and profound. Now it is time for you to find your own rest, to let this story fade, to let your thoughts slow, to allow sleep to come in its own time, in its own way. You do not have to remember everything we have discussed. You do not have to hold on to any particular lesson or insight. Just let it all wash over you like waves on a shore, gently receding, leaving only calm in their wake. Your bed, soft and warm, awaits. Or perhaps you are already there, already settling in. Either way, you are exactly where you need to be. The people we have visited tonight found their rest, sometimes easily, sometimes with difficulty, but they found it, and so will you. Let your eyes close now if they have not already. Let your breathing slow, deep breath in, hold, and slowly out, again and again. Feel the weight of your body sinking into softness. Feel the warmth gathering around you. Feel the quiet settling in your mind. You have walked through history tonight. You have felt the texture of other lives, other nights, other struggles. You have expanded your awareness of what sleep can mean, what it has meant, what it might mean. And now you return to yourself, to this moment, to this breath, to this peaceful descent into rest. The night is here. The darkness is kind. Your body knows what to do. Trust it. Trust the process. Trust the ancient rhythm that has never failed, that will not fail tonight. You are safe. You are held. You are allowed to rest. And so, with gratitude for your attention, with hope for your peaceful sleep, with connection across time and space to all those who have rested before you and all those who rest beside you now across the world, in their own beds, in their own darkness, I wish you the deepest rest, the sweetest dreams, the most gentle passage through the night. May you sleep as deeply as the earth itself. May you dream as freely as the wind. May you wake when the time comes, refreshed and renewed, ready for another day. But for now, just rest, just rest, just rest. Good night, friend. Good night.